a lot of things that go on around a wizarding school that aren't well known to the outside world, even to the parents. They're not in on some of the secrets, which for the most part is probably a good thing. It's kind of like that Muggle saying I heard once, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, I figure it's kind of the same thing about wizarding school. Sometimes it takes years before we figure out why something happened, and that's kind of hard to admit to a parent, that you're that out of control. About 3 days ago, I happened to pass a group of 7th year students standing in the hallway. One young man was bragging to his friends about a prank he had supposedly pulled off in his 2nd year. And it caught my attention because it sounded very familiar to me. And now obviously he thought the statute of limitations was over or something, he couldn't be punished for it. Or he possibly didn't see me standing there. But this is the story he was telling his friends. When I was a boy, I'd spend my summers down south of Yorkshire at my granny's isolated little farm. I'd practice spells all day long, fly my broom, free as a song. One day I happened to catch myself a garden gnome. Well, I shoved him way down in an old potions box, punched a couple of holes on top. When summer holidays were over, I snuck him back to school. Well, I was sitting way back in the great hall, showing him to my best friend Atticall, when that gnome got loose and went totally berserk. What happened next is hard to tell. Some thought it was heaven, others thought it was, well, the fact that something was among us was plain to see. As the sorting hat called out, "Hufflepuff," that gnome dove under Neville Longbottom's trouser cuff. Neville leaped to his feet and yelled, "Something's got a hold on me! Yow!" The day the gnome went berserk in the Hogwarts Great Hall, in the middle of that sorting ceremony, though no one knew quite where to look, we all pulled out our new school books and we were waving wands and shooting spells all over. Well, Neville hit the aisle, dancing and screaming. Some thought he was imperious, others thought he had a demon. Neville thought he had a weed eater loose in his Fruit of the Looms. He fell to his knees to plead and beg, and that gnome ran out of his trouser leg, unobserved, down to the other side of the room, all the way down to where the professors sat, including Dolores Umbridge in her ugly pink hat. Well, you should have seen the look in her eyes when that gnome jumped her garters and crossed her thighs. She leaped to her feet and yelled, "The ministry will hear of this." She talked of gossip, church dissension. The thing that got the most attention, she started talking about her love life. Then she started naming names. The day the gnome went berserk in the Hogwarts Great Hall, in the middle of that sorting ceremony, though no one knew quite where to look, we all pulled out our new school books and we were waving wands and shooting spells all over. Well, 7 of the meanest Slytherins got cursed and 400 house points were deducted that never got reversed. 15 volunteered for detention in the Forbidden Forest on the spot. And even without the proper certification, there were at least 46 disapparitions, 5 resulting in splinchings, which were painful to see. Now you've probably heard Beedle the Bard stories about how Merlin's magic helped Arthur ascend the throne. Oh, the wonders magic has wrought in this old world. Well, the one I'll remember to my dying day is how I helped put this school back on the straight and narrow way with a half-crazed Yorkshire garden gnome. The day the gnome went berserk in the Hogwarts Great Hall, in the middle of that sorting ceremony, though no one knew quite where to look, we all pulled out our new school books and we were waving wands and shooting spells all over. Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that statute of limitations. I think there might be something that can still be done. He shouldn't be able to get away with this. Now, I don't want you students to think that I don't enjoy being a herbology teacher, because I do. And one of the things that makes it the most enjoyable is the people I get to meet. They are just wonderful. In fact, I get to know whole families. Some of them I've taught the parents. Now I'm teaching their children. And it's like your relatives almost, you know. You're that close to these people. And there's one family in particular that I just love. I've taught them. I've taught all of their children now. And they are just wonderful. And they're Weasleys. Meet the Weasleys. They're a red-haired wizard family. From a Therese and Catchpole. They're the nicest folks you'd ever meet. Now Molly, she might give you quite a fright, but her bark is much worse than her bite. When you're with the Weasleys, you will always very quickly see that from Arthur right down to Ginny, they'll all treat you just like family. Someday, maybe Arthur will figure out what that rubber ducky's all about. When you're with the Weasleys, just remember if you fly it, you must be quiet. And don't let Molly know. Arthur, I hope that wasn't the car starting up I just heard. Uh-oh, too late. Well, they are just wonderful people. I love all of them. Now, Ginny was the youngest Weasley, and she was the only girl in the family. And in her second year, there was almost a horrible tragedy. Luckily for Ginny, her brother and a couple of his friends saved the day. Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful year that happened at this wizard school and awoke an ancient fear. Awoke an ancient fear. Students were getting petrified. A ghost was stiffly posed. If not for the courage of the fearless three, the school would be closed. The school would be closed. With first Hagrid and then Dumbledore gone, the boys knew they must act. The giant spiders were no help, then Hermione was attacked. Hermione was attacked. When Ron's sister Ginny disappeared, they knew what they must do. They grabbed Lockhart and entered the pipes, following Hermione's clue. Following Hermione's clue. When Ron got stuck with the dazed Lockhart, Harry ventured on alone. He outwitted that basilisk and saved Ginny on his own. And saved Ginny on his own. The school will long remember this and tell the exciting tale of the boy who lived, Miss Weasley too. Tom Riddle and his book, a basilisk, a phoenix and magic sword, here at Hogwarts School. Here at Hogwarts School. There's always something exciting going on at school. You know, as a herbology professor, I shouldn't have favorites, even among my plants, but I've got to confess, the mandrake has always been one of my favorites. It's such an interesting plant. Now, if you were to see a mandrake when I was repotting it, it's very young, you would notice that it has a shape very similar to a human. Well, okay, maybe you've got to squint your eyes a little bit, but you know, it's kind of there. There's a head, there's arms, there's legs. But make no mistake, they're in no way human. They're what's known as humanoid. Now, that means they have some of the characteristics of a human. Now, there are two types of mandrakes. One is the non-magical type, and then there's the type we deal with here, the magical mandrake. The difference is A magical mandrake not only resembles a human, it also goes through the same phases that a human child goes through as it's developing. Now, a human child matures in about 18 years, we hope. Now, the mandrake matures in about 7 to 8 months. It's a very accelerated growth pattern. But it does go through a lot of recognizable phases, the first of which is the infant phase. Now, I'm repotting it for the first time, and it's whining and squirming around and it's trying to gnaw on my finger. And that's similar to a human infant. When their teeth are coming in, they like to gnaw on something. It feels good on their gums, whether it's a toy or a teething ring or your finger. The only difference is, human does not know that it's causing you pain. The mandrake knows, and that's what makes it fun for him. Next phase is the toddler phase. I'm repotting it, and all of a sudden, everything is wide. Why is that plant red? Why is that plant in that pot? How come he's getting fertilizer? How come the fang geranium gets Perrier? Next phase it goes through, it wants its privacy. Don't look at me, woman. Put me back in that pot. That Calcutta rose is staring at me. Little older, it's in a pre-adolescent phase. It's very moody. Don't talk to me. I have nothing to say to you. Whatever. Starts developing a little acne. And then the last and final phase, the dreaded teen years. The only thing it has on its mind is throwing a loud, raucous party. They're going to plan the entire thing. No one's to know about it. They'll do the music, the entertainment, the food, everything. Big secret. I'm not even supposed to know about it. Well, let me tell you, I have raised upwards of 40 crops of mandrakes in my day, and I know what's going on. But I've got to the point where I let them have their little fun. I let them have their party, because they don't have a whole lot more to look forward to. They're about to the point where they're going to get boiled, stewed up, cut into pieces, and made into mandrake restorative potion. So it's not a whole lot to look forward to. But I let them have their secret. Night of the party, though, I'm usually sitting outside the greenhouse door, listening. Because I like to hear the music. Now, the mandrake, surprisingly enough, is a very musical plant. And they like to make up their own music. You know, just like a house plant, if you have a house plant, you talk to it, it grows healthier, it grows faster, supposedly. Well, I found out with magical plants, if you play music to them, the same thing happens. They become more powerful, more magical, they grow faster, healthier. In fact, my plants are some of the most magical plants available on the market. I'm known worldwide. People order plants from me. And that's because I have always played music in the greenhouses. Because that's one of the things I miss most from the circus. Now, I grew up as a child in the 50s. And I was in the Muggle world till I was 11 years old. So I was popular with all the 50s rock and rollers first coming on the scene. And there was one young man that I just adored back then. Let me think of his name. You may have heard of him. Elfish. His name was Elfish. Now, Elfish never came to wizarding school. But I think he got his letter. There was a lot of magic seeping off that boy. Woo! Huh. So that's the type of music the mandrake was used to, and that's what it based its music and its songs on. Well, a few years back, I was sitting outside the greenhouse door with my cup of tea the night of the party, and I was listening, and I just happened to hear a song, and I liked it so well that I adopted it as the theme song of the Herbology department. And this is what it was. Mandrakes threw the party in greenhouse 5. Some plants formed a band and they started to jive. The other plants jumped up and they started to swing. You should have heard those rocked out mandrakes sing, let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody hop on out of your pot and do Herbology Rock. Boobo Tuber played it on the saxophone. Gillyweed was blowing on a slide trombone. The snargle puff from Hogsmeade went crash, boom, bang. The whole rhythm section was the Monk's Hood Gang. Let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody hop on out of your pot and do Herbology Rock. Dragon Snare kept weeping towards the greenhouse door to avoid getting trampled on the wild dance floor. Poison Ivy cried, hey sweetie, don't do that lonesome crawl. You can dance with me on the greenhouse wall. Let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody hop on out of your pot and do Herbology Rock. Nightshade was messing with some water in cans, bragging that he had himself some mighty fine plans. Come on, friends, dip your roots, cause I got a hunch. They're just gonna love my fire whiskey punch. Let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody hop on out of your pot and do Herbology Rock. Venomous Tentacular said, do aconite. My roots are starting to swell, come on, let's call it a night. Aconite turned to Venomous and she said, nix, nix. I haven't even tried my new hype kicks. Let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. Everybody hop on out of your pot and do Herbology Rock. Everybody hop on out of your pot. Let's do Herbology Rock. Yeah, those mandrakes had it going on, let me tell you. Yeah, I've always thought of mandrakes as kind of unsung heroes. I mean, they save a lot of people's lives when they're made into restorative potion. People that have been transfigured, cursed, petrified, brings them back to their natural state of being. Now, I'm sure that's not something a mandrake would choose to do. It's kind of an ornery plant. It would never think it would save someone's life, but a lot of times you never know what you can do until something comes up. And that's true with whether you're a muggle or you're a wizard. A lot of times you'll have a gentleman going around and he's bragging about how brave he is, and don't worry, darling, I'll save you if anything happens. And then something happens, and he's the first one hiding under the bed. And it works the opposite way too sometimes. One of my favorite students was Neville Longbottom. And when he first came to school, he was a mess. He couldn't do anything right. He had no self-confidence. Came to his first herbology lesson in his second year. All of a sudden, something clicked for Neville. He had found something he was good at. He was fantastic at herbology. He is the best herbology student I have had to this day. Well, the more his confidence grew in herbology, the more it started to seep into other areas of his life. He started to be more confident in some of his other classes. He became more confident in his dealings with students and teachers. By the time he was a sixth year, students were looking up to him. He was a leader. And in our last great wizarding war, he was one of our greatest heroes. But if you could have seen him when he first came to school, he couldn't do anything right. He was clumsy. He was forgetful. Everything he touched just crumbled apart. Well, he had been raised by his grandmother, and she had never let him do things that she thought were dangerous. So he had never been allowed to go on a broom. She was probably afraid he would fall off and kill himself, and he very well might have, the way he was. Well, when he was at school, one of the things that always struck me as odd about Neville, he had an awful fear of one of our professors. And that was the potions master, Professor Snape. Now, none of the students liked Snape. He wasn't that type of a person. But nobody had that irrational fear that Neville did. And the more I got to know Neville, I used to ask him, why? What caused that? Why do you feel that way? What started it? He never wanted to talk about it. Until he got maybe to be in sixth year. All of a sudden he came down to me one day and he said, Professor, I'm going to tell you how I happened to meet Professor Snape and why I've never liked him. Well, turns out because Neville had not been allowed to go on a broomstick, when he came to school, that was the one thing he was really looking forward to. He thought that would be wonderful. He'd be able to fly through the sky free as a bird. So he was all excited. He went down to his first flying lesson, and it was a disaster. He fell off his broom. He broke his wrist. He ended up in the hospital wing. Well, by the time he left the hospital wing, when his wrist was all healed up, he was very depressed, and he was walking up to his dormitory, and he happened to pass some older students who were talking about a professor who was willing to sell any student who had enough galleons a potion that would help them excel in one of their classes. Well, Neville thought, that's for me. I'll get this potion. I'll use it for flying lessons. I'll be one of the best flyers in the school. So he hurried up to his dormitory, and he got the money Grandma had given him for his birthday, and he went down to the dungeons. And in Neville's own words, this is what happened. I took my troubles to Professor Snape, that bad-like teacher in the huge black cape. He's got a roost down in dungeon number 9, selling bootleg potions for 6 galleons, Connaught 5. I told him that my broomstick barely left the ground. The only direction that it knew was down. He peered at my broom and he offered up a leer. Said, what you need is my moldy butterbeer. He bent down, swooped around, and gave me a sneer. He said, I got some moldering now right over here. It smelled like boobo tuber, pus as black as giant squid ink. I gripped my broom, I closed my eyes, I gulped that drink. I didn't know if I was up or down. My broom was zooming with me all around. I couldn't tell if I was near the ceiling or the floor, until I cracked my head on that solid dungeon door. The hospital wing is where I woke up that night again, and I don't think I'm going back to try another flight. How'd that dungeon door get closed anyway? I know I left it open. Must have been that Snape. I don't think I trust that guy. He's kind of scary. Ooh. And Snape was scary. He scared most of the students, but a lot of them didn't let on like Neville did. And Snape was more than scary. He was a bully. He bullied all the students all the time. In fact, he even bullied some of us teachers if he thought he could get away with it. And that is one thing I have never been able to abide, is a bully. I don't care what happened in your childhood. I don't care how you were raised, how awful it was. I don't care about how many loves you have loved and lost. And I don't care about always. Oh, get over it. You were treated badly. You should be the one person who treats others with respect. Because you know how awful it can be to be bullied. So I felt very bad for the students that had to deal with the bully Snape. Bad thing was, that was not the only bully at the school. There was the caretaker, a man by the name of Argus Filch, who was also a bully. Now, Argus was kind of an odd duck anyway. His constant companion was his cat, who he called Mrs. Norris. That cat was the only living creature I have ever heard Filch be kind to. He would bully the students for the most ridiculous things. The soles on your shoes are too thick. Your eyelashes are too curly. Things he would just make up. He was just that ornery. Well, he was raised, kind of odd upbringing. He was born into a very powerful, very high-up wizarding family. And he was the only person ever to be born in that family that did not have any magic. He's what's known as a squib, which is kind of a non-magical wizard. So I'm sure it wasn't easy for him growing up in this family. Now, I'm sure they probably were very nice people and treated him well, but just the fact they all had something that he really wanted. It had to be hard. Now, that's why I didn't understand when he finally was old enough to leave home and go get a job. He went to a wizard school. Why would he want to surround himself again with people who had magic? Most of them would be students younger than him that had the only thing he had ever really wanted. Now maybe he thought it would wear off on him. Maybe he thought he could steal some. Maybe he thought he was a late bloomer. I do know he ordered a mail order class to try and learn magic. But you had to have a tiny kernel of magic buried deep inside your soul for it to work with. And he didn't even have that. Or if he did, it had shriveled up and died long ago because he was so ornery. But even though he was a big bully, and you know how I feel about bullies, I have a soft spot in my heart for Argus. And that's because I found out he has something that I value very highly. He has a musical soul. And I know that's hard to believe. I'll tell you how I know. I had planted a crop of moonlight daisies on the highest astrology tower. And one afternoon I was going to check on them. I was walking down this totally deserted 6th floor corridor when I heard a voice coming from a closed door across the hall. And I later found out it was a broom closet. Well, being a good-hearted soul and wanting to make sure no one was in distress and needed my help, I decided to investigate. This is what I heard. Ah, Mrs. Norris, it could all have been so different. I could have whiled away for hours and never had to scour another bloody sink. I would just have said a spell, it would shine it up so well if I only had magic. I could clean and wax the floors and polish all the doors, and I'd do it so quick. With the way my wand would be swirling, I could be another Merlin if I only had magic. Oh, I could tell you how those Weasley twins pulled off their jokes. I could even turn the tables on those tricky blokes. Then we'd all laugh. I'd still tell their folks. I would not be just a squib and have to lie and fib to protect my dignity. But I wouldn't be so vicious, 'cause I would have all my wishes if I only had magic. Ah, Mrs. Norris, it ain't going to happen. We might as well get back to work. Well, I hightailed it down that corridor and out of sight before they ever came out of that door. And he never knew that I had heard him that day. But you know, every time I see him now, I can't help but picture him in old clothes and a raggedy old hat with straw sticking out all over, like that scarecrow in that Muggle movie I saw when I was a girl. And I can't help but smile. Well, that finishes our herbology lesson for today. Now, next time I see you, we're going to really get down to working hard, so I expect you all to come prepared. Now, you all enjoy the rest of your day. Take care and stay safe.